So today we talked about the history of trade negotiations on services and how some of the most radical ideas proposed to the creation of the WTO have been effectively blocked. For example, one of the first proposals was to require the government regulation of service industries like hospitals or insurance companies or banks or utility companies, that those must be no more burdensome than necessary. And that would completely invert the historical, traditional democratic approach to regulating service industries. And so that was blocked, and then the industries came back with proposals about 10 years later to limit government's power to regulate services domestically. They changed the language, so instead of using a necessity test, they used requirements that regulations must be objective or relevant or pre-established. Nice sounding words, but each of these words is ambiguous. It has a benign definition, but also a definition in WTO law that effectively limits government's power. Take the approach of requiring that regulations should be objective, for example. Oh, there are many roles unions can play. One is analysis and education. Unions have excellent research departments. They have economists and lawyers and public administration experts who can study the language being proposed in these negotiations and translate it to the rest of the world. Secondly, they can help educate the negotiators. I was shocked when I saw in the mid-2000s a conversation between energy regulators and trade negotiators. What I learned was that trade negotiators understood trade, but they didn't understand the industries that they were negotiating about. They didn't understand the nature of a monopoly in the electricity market. They didn't understand how one state's market might affect another state's market. They didn't understand the legal principles that they were about to undermine by the language they were supporting. So, we assume that trade negotiators are powerful, and with power comes knowledge, but that's not the case. And so unions can help educate actually the people who are negotiating these agreements. And finally, the ground beneath all of these negotiations is political. And unions, better than most groups in civil society, have a political base. They are politically sophisticated, and they can communicate to elected officials that this is important not just for unions, but the public broadly speaking. That political message has to be has to complement the more technical legal message and the economic message that's part of trade negotiations.